thanks to each of you for being here. It's an honor to have you here with us. Secretary Wright, I've got a few questions for you. I was alerted to a situation a few weeks ago that occurred at the Air Force Academy involving the removal of a Bible verse from a whiteboard outside of a cadet's dormitory room. Are you familiar with that incident?
Yes, sir, I am. Okay.
So let me just sort of restate the basic facts as I'm aware of them, and then tell me what I'm missing. Based on the information that I and my staff have been able to obtain from the Air Force, the cadets at the Air Force Academy use these whiteboards, according to the Air Force, in order to display, quote, items, quotes, or other things that reflect their personality, or from which they draw inspiration, close quote. The cadet in question made this display, wrote this Bible verse up on his whiteboard, found himself being reported through his chain of command within the cadet structure, and also apparently the air officer commanding became involved in the situation and used it as what someone described as a teachable moment, and the cadet apparently took it down. Now, those who have provided this account have said that he took it down voluntarily, although I do find the use of the word voluntarily to be curious, given that it occurred after intervention from those in his chain of command. The Bible verse in question that he was quoting was not one that I would regard as offensive. It was from Galatians chapter 2, verse 20, which is fairly innocuous as I read it. It says simply, I am crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me, and in the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Now, last year, this committee, meaning the whole committee, the Senate Armed Services Committee, passed an amendment that I introduced in connection with the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2014. Section 532A became that amendment. That is, the amendment I introduced and that was passed in this committee survived the various iterations of the NDAA for FY 2014, and it now appears in Section 532A. And it says, unless it could have an adverse impact on military readiness, unit cohesion, and good order and discipline, the armed forces shall accommodate individual expressions of belief. Now, I regard this as an individual expression of belief. It's also an expression of something from which this cadet apparently draws inspiration. So my question for you is, how can this particular Bible verse quoted by this cadet from the book of Galatians, simply declaring his faith from which he draws inspiration, placed on a board that traditionally is used for that purpose, to reflect that cadet's personality and sources from which the cadet draws inspiration, how can that be deemed inappropriate?
First, sir, I am not as familiar with the case as it appears you are. And what I have heard from the members of the Air Force, I have a little conflicting information. So to address the case right now, I think would be inappropriate. But I would like to come over or bring someone over specifically to address this case, myself and or somebody from the Air Force. But globally, for the Department of Defense, we do support, one, freedom of speech, and we totally support the freedom to exercise your religion, whether it is, and I will be honest with you, on my desk I have, I'm of the Catholic faith, I have a Mass card of St. Teresa on my desk, which I use as my faith. I don't start out my meetings that way because as a leader of 32,000 people, that would be inappropriate. But I use that, and so I think that common sense needs to clearly be applied when we talk about whether or not they can have an article of faith or something like that on their desk or on their wall. But when you're a leader, you have to understand that you have all faiths that you command, and you must respect everybody's faith. So again, I don't know the very specific facts of the Air Force. I don't want to get into that in public.
But you said a moment ago that your understanding of it is a little bit different than mine. Can you enlighten me as to how it was different?
Sir, I heard that it wasn't he that wrote the verse. I heard it was his roommate. But I need to make sure that I am getting the correct information if it conflicts with your information. I think the bottom line is we both need to know exactly the end state.
Right, right.
And so if you don't mind, sir, if I can come over and bring the Air Force A1, the person in charge of personnel, that would be great. I also, Mr. Volrath, do you have anything to add on the religious?
No, I don't, Secretary Wright, except just reinforce what she said. We certainly are trying to comply with the law and intend to. It is fundamental to free speech and exercise of religion. It's part of what makes America America.
Certainly, and I definitely agree with that, and my time's winding down, and so I appreciate the offer to come by and inform me as to what the facts were.
Yes, sir.
As whether it was this cadet or whether it was the cadet's roommate. Somebody wrote it
Yes, sir.
as an expression of their faith, and somebody took it down. The fact that it was taken down is itself alarming, much as it would be alarming, I would think, if someone came to you and removed something from your desk that is a source of faith and inspiration from you. And this is exactly the kind of scenario that we had in mind when we adopted this amendment, certainly when I introduced this amendment. And I'd also note that on the Army's website can be found a very inspiring statement from General Eisenhower sent just prior to the invasion at D-Day, in which he concluded his remarks by saying to the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who were about to embark on this very dangerous mission, "And let us all beseech the blessings of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking." If that's not offensive, then I find it difficult to understand how the decision by this cadet at the Air Force Academy, placed on a whiteboard outside his dormitory for the purpose of expressing something about his personality and about sources from which he draws inspiration, how that could possibly be deemed offensive, how that could require a teachable moment, and how that could require those in his chain of command to give him encouragement that would result in him taking it down. Thank you very much. I see my time's expired. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Secretary